All right, welcome, Twim Nation. This is This Week in Mormons, and I am one half of the Twim sisters, Tiffany Hales, and I am here this week to record a podcast. And I have a brand new, well, she's not new to Twim because she's a longtime Twim listener, but she has never co-hosted before. I have Sarah Jorgensen with me here today. Sarah, happy to have you. Thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm thrilled to be here.
Okay, well, Sarah, before we start talking about news stories, let's just give our listeners a little introduction and let's tell them a little bit about Sarah. Why don't you just kind of share with us where you live? Tell us a little bit about your family. Um, let's start with that, and then
Okay.
I'll ask you a couple more questions.
Okay. Um, I currently live in Southern Utah in St. George. I'm originally from Orange County, California. My family still lives there, so we go back there a lot. And I went to Utah State for college and met my husband there, and then we kind of just picked a spot in the middle. We're actually to the mile, 1 mile away from the middle between both of our parents' houses. So that's kind of a funny little
That's
thing for us.
awesome.
We have three great kids that are, growing up, and we're figuring all of that out. So that's kind of, who we are, where we're from.
Okay. Well, tell us, how long have you been listening to Twim? And how did you find Twim?
I was thinking about that. I was trying to remember I've been listening for years.
Okay.
I think it was probably like a conference recap. I think that was probably the first episode I listened to. And then I just like loved it so much, and it's like my first go-to every week. So
Well, we thank you. So, listeners, you may have recall a few weeks ago, I put out a call and I said, "Hey, any listener who would like to join me and co-host on a podcast, I will make this so easy for you. I do all the tech. All you have to do is just read the stories and come on and talk with me." And Sarah responded to that call, and that's how we have Sarah today. So, thank you very much. And I'm going to reiterate that call to any other listener out there who wants to do this. I promise I'll be nice. Sarah,
okay.
have I been nice?
Yeah, I can say she has made it very easy, and it's been great. So do it. It's going to be fun.
All right. So, Sarah, when you're not chasing your three kids around, what do you like to do in your spare time besides listen to Twim?
Always listen to Twim first. And then I do a lot of like community work in my area. I'm a substitute teacher at the
Ooh.
schools. I work a lot with the PTA. I also I work the elections for Washington County, and I just do
Oh,
a lot of, whatever's needed around the around the town. So it's kind of
that
fun.
is awesome. So, tell me, I always like to ask this question. Where do you listen to Twim? Like,
Um,
do you do this like in your car while you're cleaning? People have all sorts of different ways that they listen to Twim. And so I'm just curious, how do you listen to Twim?
Yeah, I'm a big walker, so I have my AirPods in and I just go on, I walk my miles in the mornings usually before my kids are up in the summer. So I just usually listen to it on that in the mornings around the, you know, my neighborhood walking track. So
That's awesome. Well, then that explains why we get along so well because I do the same thing. I listen to podcasts, but I'm walking because I'm not a morning person and I don't live in St. George where it's 1,000 degrees.
yeah, you got to
I'm
get up
walking at
early.
night.
We do that too in the other seasons of the year. Currently it's 6 a.m. or nothing. So
Oh, that's where you're at right now. That's very true. So, well, listeners are, I mean, the listeners can't see this, but if you're watching us on the YouTube feed, you can see I am in a very different background. I am not at my house, which is where I normally podcast out of, either my house or Ariane's house. I took the show on the road last weekend. I was down in Southern California, your neck of the woods,
yeah.
Sarah, for just a little sisters weekend with my sister Ariane and my other sister Ciaran. And we had a blast down there and recorded an episode together. And then I came home and I was home for about 3 days. And then I left again. And now I am in Utah. I'm actually in Salt Lake. So I have never recorded Twim from the state of Utah. So this is a new one for me. The reason I came down here is I have a brother and he and his wife are expecting twins, and their baby shower is today. And so that's why I am down here, and I'm just kind of laughing because he is 48. These are his first babies. She is considerably younger than him. And they're expecting twin boys. And they are just so over the moon excited. And my sisters and I are just shaking our head and we're like, "Oh, you have no clue what you're getting into."
That is so funny. I have two boys that are just 18 months apart,
Oh,
almost
that's
a
almost
little
like
over.
having twins.
And I mean, it's great. It's great fun, but it's a lot. So
Yeah.
I get that.
Well, do you find that like what one doesn't think of, the other does, and they
Yep.
kind of play off each other?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Exactly. Well, when I found out that he was having twin boys, I really had to laugh because our parents have both passed away, and he was kind of a little bit of a hellion growing up, and took him a while to finally mature and get to adulting. Hence the reason he's 48 and expecting his first child. And I just laughed. I told my sisters, I said, "Oh, our mother's revenge is strong."
She's been preparing those babies for
She's been preparing those babies.
to do
That's
good
another
work.
reason why I'm like, "Oh, you don't even know what you're getting into."
I love it.
But one of the things that I did yesterday, since I was down in Utah, and we have talked about this on Twim before, is the Church History Museum has a Minerva Teichert exhibit going on right now, and it runs through the 3rd of August. So literally in a week, little less than a week, that exhibit will be going away. And so I went with my daughter yesterday, and we saw the Minerva Teichert exhibit at the Church History Museum. And I love Minerva, absolutely love Minerva. I've got three of her, not well, obviously not her actual paintings, but prints of her paintings in my house. She's my favorite church artist. And so it was very cool to see those paintings, the original works of art up close and personal. The church has done a great job with it. And so I just encourage anyone who is in the Salt Lake area. If you haven't seen the Minerva Teichert exhibit, you should go see the Minerva Teichert exhibit. One of the things that I really liked about it too is they probably had about 6 paintings where they had these little cards on the side of the painting, and you could pull the card, and one side of the card had a picture of the painting, and the other side of the card had like fun facts about the painting and things that you should look for in the painting, and just made it really interactive. So it was super cool. So
That's awesome.
like I said, I'm encouraging anybody who's in the Salt Lake area to go see that exhibit because it is definitely worth your time.
That's
So,
awesome.
all right, well, Sarah, we are here to do news. Should we do some news stories?
Let's do it. I'm ready.
Okay. Well, it's actually been kind of a really slow news week. I don't know if you noticed that in scouring the
Yes.
internet for stories. I certainly did. And July typically is pretty slow with the church because the month of July, the general authorities generally take off and they have a little downtime and vacation time. They're not out there speaking a whole lot. And so not a lot of business is getting done in the month of July. So this is not unusual that it's pretty slow news week. But I think the biggest story of the week is probably the funeral of Sister Holland. Last week, when my sisters and I recorded, she had just passed away the day before. They had not made the funeral arrangements. The funeral was yesterday. You and I are recording on a Saturday. So the funeral was Friday, excuse me, yesterday, which I believe yesterday was the 28th, maybe. Anyway, and so it was held at the Conference Center Theater. And there, of course, were lots of tributes this week to Sister Holland. Sherry Dew wrote a really excellent tribute to Sister Holland that was in the church news. And she just talked about what an inspiring lady Sister Holland was to her, and that she was a spiritual giant among women. And she said the nice thing about Sister Holland is she never really saw herself that way. She was very humble and unassuming, and she was quite surprised, Sister Holland was, when Deseret News approached her, not Deseret News, excuse me, Deseret Book approached her about writing a book. And she's like, really? Anybody wants to listen to what I have to say? And my favorite part of this article was Sister Dew says, earlier this year, I had the privilege of sitting next to Sister Holland during a temple endowment session. At one point in the session, I had a profound awareness come over me. I can't find the words to do that moment justice other than to say I knew I was seated next to a sheer goodness and that this was a woman I should seek to emulate.
Mm.
So anyway, Sarah, thoughts on Sister Holland and her funeral. I don't know if you watched it or
Um,
read any follow up on her funeral yesterday.
yeah, I heard a lot about it. I mean, I didn't watch the whole thing in its
Mhm.
entirety, but I did hear little pieces of it, and I just feel so sad for the family. I don't know. I just like always hard to lose anybody, obviously, but to lose such a like a matriarch of a family is just really sad and hard. I'm sure. I loved uh, Tamu from Sisters in Zion posted that to be loved by Sister Patricia Holland was to experience love that was both divine and human. And she felt blessed and honored to have known her. And I just felt like that is such a beautiful legacy to leave behind and something that we can all really work to do to make our lives more like loving and make sure the people in our lives know that our love is bigger than, you know what I mean? The little things
Yeah,
we kind of get stuck on here, right?
yeah, ex-
So thought she was a great
exactly.
example of that.
Wonderful example. And, there was a Deseret News article that came out late yesterday, kind of recapping the funeral.
Mm,
With kind of the crazy schedule I had yesterday, I didn't get a chance to watch the funeral. And I was assuming that it would be on the church's YouTube site because I thought, oh, tomorrow night, or I thought, when I go to bed, I can kind of scan it when I go to bed. I couldn't find it last night. So all I have is just kind of the news recap from the Deseret News. And there were, of course, a number of members of the Quorum of the 12 and the First Presidency was all there. I thought it was interesting. The speakers, each one of her kids spoke. So Matthew Holland, their oldest son, spoke, and then their daughter, Mary Alice Holland McCann, and then their son, David Holland. And then it looks like uh, Sister McCann, their daughter, looks like her husband, who I did not realize is apparently an Area 70,
mm,
performed a piano medley. And then her daughter in laws did the opening and closing prayer. Now, what was really interesting is Matthew Holland got up and he read the words apparently that Elder Holland wanted to say. And he said, although the circumstances of his own health and emotions prevented Elder Holland from standing to make an extended tribute to his beloved companion, Elder Matthew S. Holland read a few words written by his father. And I just want to share some of these words because I thought they were so poignant. I had read an article earlier in the week where Elder Holland was talking about Pat and that um, he was just talking about how much of a support she was to him and that he just could not imagine doing life without her. And so he says, his dad says, calling Sister Holland the greatest woman I have ever known. Elder Jeffrey R. Holland said he is heartbroken by her loss, yet sustained by the power of the prayers of so many. I thought the onset of neuropathy and dialysis was enough, but this loss of Pat so unexpectedly has been devastating, he said. And that just tugged at my
so sad.
heartstrings.
It's so sad that he has such a burden like with his health right now anyway, and then to
Yeah,
like add a real emotional burden on top of that is probably just so unbearable at the moment.
I can't even imagine. Well, and these words confirmed what I had kind of wondered and suspected last week. We knew Elder Holland's health wasn't well, but we
Right.
had not heard anything about Sister Holland. And then all of a sudden she passes away, where he says this loss being so unexpected that whatever was going on with her health was not, this was not an anticipated loss. And so,
Yeah, which just makes it, if you can kind of prep, if you know, but you can't
exactly.
do any of that grief work beforehand if I mean, it happens to people all the time, but it's so sad.
Exactly. So, it'll be really interesting to see. We've got general conference coming up in about 2 months. whether Elder Holland will be in a physical and emotional state to be able to speak at General Conference. I hope so. His messages are always so poignant and so good, and he's one of my favorites.
He is a
And
really gifted speaker. That's true.
it will be really interesting. You know, if he speaks, he's probably going to share some thoughts about the loss of Pat. We've seen that from a lot of other general authorities when they speak post conference following the loss of a spouse. I also kind of wonder as well. Again, this is just like pure speculation on my part. Um, we know his health isn't well. We know that this loss is devastating. How much longer are we going to have Elder Holland? Is this
Mhm.
just going to kind of be one of those things where he's like, I'm done fighting this battle? I don't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah, it's
So,
hard. I mean, I don't know, sympathize with that feeling because I don't know, how do you keep going forever when you don't even, you're sick,
yeah,
you know, you're not like, going to get all the way better. I don't know.
yeah,
It's so hard.
yeah,
It's so hard.
yeah. So,
Ooh.
our hearts go out to Elder Holland and his family, and just, you know, there were beautiful messages that were shared about Sister Holland, and she really led just kind of an incredible life and just a very good legacy of faith. But um, super, super, super sad for their family. They will miss her deeply. So,
Yeah, I agree.
all right, Sarah, you have our next story.
Which is also devastating. So, I don't, do we usually say the date that this happened? Let's see. On July 23rd, it was announced that a senior sister missionary from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter day Saints had died in a serious car crash in, um, oh, I don't know how to say that.
I
Do you know
think
how to
it's
say it?
Vananata. I should know because they did Survivor, the TV show Survivor, one of the
My favorite
seasons
show.
there, but
Oh,
I don't know how to pronounce it.
it's on her mission with her husband. I guess there was another vehicle that kind of veered over into her lane of traffic and it was a head on collision, which is just so sad. We think about sending these, missionaries, young or, senior couples or anyone else on these missions to do service. And it just is so sad that, something like this can happen. So there's been some articles from her kids and her family that have kind of talked about what a wonderful woman she was and how they're going to support her husband when he comes home. And I can't imagine. My parents are serving a service mission right now, and I just can't imagine that loss in the middle of that whole thing just seems so hard to understand. So I hope that they have the peace that they can find,
Yeah,
and I hope they're really comforted in this time because it's unimaginable to lose a
it
missionary of your family, while they're on their mission.
exactly.
It just
I
seems so
know
mean.
it really
So
does, but at the same time, you think, okay, well, if you're going to go and you're serving a mission, you're at least, you
doing the
know,
right thing.
you're in the right place, doing kind of
Yep,
the right thing.
I had
But
that thought.
they are from Riverton, so
Oh,
they are
Riverton.
from Utah, and yes, that will be very sad. The other thing that was sad too is she died on her birthday.
Oh my gosh, I read that. That is the worst.
Exactly. I'm like, oh, the
Oh,
family will have a hard time not forgetting that day. So anyway,
right?
our hearts and prayers go out to that family too. So
Definitely, definitely.
all right, well, maybe we should move on from the very sad news. We're starting
Please.
this show out on a very low note, and
Feels like that.
oh, anyway, so let's move on from death and dying to lawsuits because
Woo!
that's always fun.
I like it. I like it.
That's a change in topic. So we have a couple of lawsuit related articles we're going to talk about. The first one is the temple in Cody, Wyoming. As we know, President Nelson has announced that they wanted to build a temple in Cody, Wyoming. They selected their site, and their site is in the middle of a residential area, which again is not unusual. You look at a lot of temple sites, and it is not, it is not unusual for them to be in the middle of kind of residential areas. So that's kind of where the problem becomes, because the height in the residential area is you can't be any higher than 30 feet. So the design of the temple, it's going to be a one-story temple that's 25 to 26 feet tall. But the biggest issue is the steeple on the temple is going to be 77 feet. So that's going to make the temple over 100 feet. So that means they have to get a conditional use permit and a variance for that height. So the church had their site plan, and they presented their site plan to the Planning and Zoning Commission for the city of Cody. And the Planning and Zoning Commission of the city of Cody is made up of 7 people. And let me explain to you why this is important to understand. On the night of the meeting, only 5 of the members of the Planning and Zoning Commission were present at the meeting. Not really sure where the other 2 were, but they weren't there. So there were 5. So they had a quorum. And when they went to vote on the site plan, 1 abstained. Again, not really sure why that person abstained. So there were 4 people voting on the plan, which again is a quorum. And they voted 3-1 to accept the site plan. So after they voted to accept the site plan, the chairman, who I'm guessing was the one no vote, although I don't know for sure,
Oh,
said,
interesting.
"This is not a valid vote because we don't have the full quorum, the full committee here, the full planning and zoning committee, and we need to have the full planning and zoning committee, and we need to have at least 4 votes of the 7 of the planning and zoning committee." And so while they voted to accept the site plan, he said it's not valid and refused to accept it. Hence, the church filed a lawsuit against the city of Cody. I thought this was a very unusual move. Generally speaking, the church does not like to file litigation in these matters. They like to go back to the drawing board and work with people. But they say, this is what the church says. The church says that when you look at the rules or the regulations that govern the Planning and Zoning Commission, the city code, it only requires support from the majority of the board members in attendance as long as a quorum is there. And so the church is arguing, hey, there were 4 of the 7 that constitutes a quorum. 3 of those, or actually there were 5 of the 7, so that constitutes a quorum. 3 of those 5 voted in our favor, and so the site plan should be accepted. And so this is now in district court.
It seems
So
like a hyper technicality.
it really does.
It seems like, I mean, I don't know. My husband works for the city of Ivins and over by Tuacahn. Have you ever been
Mm-hmm.
to Tuacahn? So he works in that
Yes.
city, and they have a ton of building going on. And so he does a lot with these kinds of, I mean, he's always working with some new developer.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
it like his like only goal is to be like so consistent and so, you know, with these rules, because you get stuck in weird things like this if you don't just follow the rules the way they're written. And so I don't know, it's interesting to read this knowing some of the things he's been
Yeah.
doing at work, because it just seems so, like, it seems shady that like the guy didn't vote, if that was him. I know we don't know
Yeah.
that for sure, but and then he's the one that's saying no. You know what I mean? It just seems so like,
Yeah.
I don't know, weird.
Well, there's been a lot of controversy. There were people that testified both before in support of the temple and people that testified against the temple. There was one particular gentleman. I took a quote of what he said. He called the temple a 100-foot billboard advertising Mormonism that us Gentiles will have to view day after day.
Oh, that's aggressive.
Yes.
I just think it's funny, and it's in Texas, right?
No,
Oh,
Cody, Wyoming.
Wyoming. Oh, I was thinking Texas, but I don't know. It just, they're always beautiful. It's not
Yeah.
like it's, I don't know. You can see the Red Cliffs Temple, the new one, from my kitchen window. Like, it's in my ward boundaries. I could walk there. It's 0.2 miles from my house. And we have a lot of neighbors that aren't members, and they're all like, but at least it's pretty. Like, I
Yeah.
don't want to go there, but at least it's pretty, you know? And so I
Yeah.
just feel like, come on, we're not building some weird, like, statue or something of like, you know what I mean? I don't know. It just seems
Exactly.
like such a weird line to take, but
It really does. And so I think it's going to be really interesting. I, of course, will continue to follow this story just to see how this plays out because, like I said, I usually speaking, the church does not like to get into litigation over these matters,
Right.
and they are. And so
So that
you
tells a
know,
little bit that there's something else happening, right?
there's something else happening. It kind of reading between the lines is what this tells me. And the really interesting thing is I think, and again, it kind of depends on how their city code is written. While planning and zoning approved it, generally speaking, it has to have final approval by city council. So this is generally, may not even be final approval. So,
Interesting.
although if their code is written differently, maybe if you get a yes vote out of planning and zoning, you don't have to go to city council. Every city kind of has different codes, but it's kind of been my experience that usually on a lot of these issues that you do have to then go to city council and get final approval from city council because planning and zoning members are not elected. They're usually appointed and the city council is the elected officials. So
Right. Right.
I don't know. I don't know how
Yeah,
they're
we'll have to
gonna
follow that. It just seems like there's more to this story
exactly. I don't know how they're gonna resolve
that we
that.
don't know yet. So,
So, well, speaking of
oh,
lawsuits that we have followed on TWIM,
let's do it. Our next story is, let me just pull it up to make sure that I'm giving all of the true facts. Crumble Cookie has dismissed their lawsuit against Crave, but the Dirty Dough suit is still open. Um, I think this is just funny. We have in St. George a Crave and a Dirty Dough and a Crumble and numerous other cookie stores. So I just think it's a little bit funny that they're all in this like argument, like
it
with each
is.
other. I don't know. It just seems so intense. But they said that all of the claims are dismissed and the case is closed. The specific reason for dismissal was not given, but they have reached an amicable settlement to trademark and trade dress infringement dispute. So Crave and Crumble are friends again, but um, I think it said that Dirty Dough is still an
Oh, yeah.
inactive lawsuit. So the cookie war continues, and
The
we'll
cookie war
just
continues.
oh,
Exactly.
just never ending.
Okay, so since you live in the St. George area, I want to ask you because Ariane and Ciaran and I talked about this last week the
Mm-hmm.
origins of the pink cookie. And I can't even remember the gas station down there that
Dutchman's,
sells
yes,
Dutchman's that
uh
sells
huh,
the pink cookie. So have you had a Dutchman's pink cookie?
of course, yes.
Okay, I want your opinion. How does the Dutchman's pink cookie compare to some of these other cookies? What are your
Well,
thoughts on that?
Swig, when it opened originally, I think it opened in like 2010, 11, 12, something like that. They used to buy their cookies from Dutchman's, but now they
Yes.
make their own, right? Okay, so Dutchman's cookies are really, really good. They have a lot of options. It's not just the pink cookie. You go there and
Oh,
there's a
okay.
beautiful case of like a billion different kinds of cookies, and they're all really good. My favorite one is the snickerdoodle one.
Oh.
But this pink cookie is really delicious also. The only beef I have with Crumble's new cookie recipe is that they freeze them
Mm,
because obviously, I mean, I get it. They sell a billion cookies a day and they can't keep them fresh. They used to like spread the frosting on it right in
yeah.
front of you and then give it to you, but they don't do that anymore. Everything's frozen. So sometimes you get like a frozen cookie when you go through the Swig drive through, which, is fine, but it's actually just a frozen cookie. But I like the Dutchman's cookies, but it's all the way in Santa Clara. So, it's a
Oh, so
20-minute drive. I
that's a little
can't
hike.
possibly.
You have to really want to go there.
I know that we live in a small town. It's a little bit too much, but every time I'm over there, we stop and get a cookie. So
Okay.
it's
Well,
fun.
good to know.
Yeah,
Next time I make my way to St. George, and it's been a number of years since I've been in St. George, but if I find myself in St. George, I'm going to go to the Dutchman's and I'm
you
going to
should.
get one of these pink cookies because I am a connoisseur of the
Oh,
sugar
are
cookie.
you? They're
Yes,
really good.
I love a good sugar cookie, so I'm going to
Yeah.
have to try that. I
I
think
definitely think that the Swig or the Dutchman's cookie, the Swig original one or the Dutchman's one is my favorite pink cookie or frosted
yeah.
sugar cookie from all of the. There's like 11,000 cookie stores, it feels like, everywhere you go.
Yeah.
So.
Exactly.
Which is kind of why this lawsuit is funny because they all are doing this same thing. Like, I mean, different recipes, and I get it. I get that
Yeah,
there's like a whole, similarity in the logos or whatever they're fighting, but I just think it's kind of funny because there's so many options. So,
agreed. All right. So our next story, we are going to talk about the movie The Sound of Freedom. Um, Sarah, have you seen the movie?
I have not seen the movie.
Neither have I. So, the article that we are talking about is about Angel Studios has found a box office hit in The Sound of Freedom. And after 3 weeks in theaters, it's still among the top film rankings. So let's give a little background here. Sound of Freedom is a movie that is loosely based on some life experiences of Tim Ballard, who started an organization called Underground Railroad to help stop and prevent child sex trafficking. And Angel Studios also produces The Chosen, and Angel Studios is also owned by three brothers who are members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, as is Tim Ballard. So that is why this is a This Week in Mormons appropriate topic to be discussing.
Remind
So
me, Tiffany, is this the same people that owned VidAngel?
No, I
Oh,
don't think they
no.
own VidAngel. I don't know that for sure. But
Okay.
when I was reading a little bit about Angel Studios, I didn't see anything come up with VidAngel. So I think
Okay.
the
No problem.
VidAngel owners are different
Are
people. I
different.
think they just call this Angel Studios. And one of the things that they do, this is how they did The Chosen, and this is also how they did funded the distribution of this movie, is they like to do crowdsource funding. And so they put it out there and they get people to invest, and then they get a little share of the pie in investing, and that's how they were able to raise money to continue to produce episodes of The Chosen, and that's how they did this particular movie. So there is a little bit of controversy surrounding this particular movie. For anybody who has been on social media lately, you can see two sides of this story. So, this movie was released on July 4th, which was a Tuesday. It is a bit unusual to have a movie released on July 4th. Well, not on July 4th, but on a Tuesday. Usually they release movies on a Friday because you want that weekend box office traffic. But it was released on Tuesday, July 4th. It did very well that day. It actually that day outperformed Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. So there was a whole lot of chatter on the internet about this movie beat the big player Indiana Jones. It is true for that particular day, it did
On the
beat
4th of
Indiana
July
Jones.
when everyone else was doing
However,
something else, right?
Indiana Jones had been in theaters for 4 days prior to Sound of Freedom being released. And if you look at first day box office numbers for Indiana Jones and first day box office numbers for Sound of Freedom, Indiana Jones has clearly beat Sound of Freedom. When you look at overall box office numbers, as of a few days ago, Indiana Jones was sitting at $339 million, and Sound of Freedom was sitting at $130 million. So Indiana Jones is outperforming it about 2 to 1. And so I've been kind of bugged by those misleading statistics that I've seen going around. I've also been bothered, and these statistics tie into the thing that's been bothering me more than anything else. If you've been on the internet, you've seen a lot about Sound of Freedom. This is the movie Hollywood never wanted to see distributed. This is the movie Hollywood tried to suppress. This is the movie Hollywood doesn't want you to see. Like there's been some big conspiracy in Hollywood against this particular movie and not having this movie come out because Hollywood does not want to raise awareness about child sex trafficking. And I could go down the rabbit hole of why people think Hollywood doesn't want to raise awareness about that, but I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole. Anyway, so I did a little investigating into this, and what I found was just to kind of clear the dialogue here and get some facts out there is that this movie was made in 2018. So it's been done for 5 years. Again, that ties into a lot of what they've been saying, which is, oh, studios sat on this for 5 years and until, they were finally able to get it released and wrangle it from Disney. And they say Disney and Amazon and Netflix and Hulu, none of them wanted you to see this movie. Well, here's what happened. In 2017, Disney announced a merger with 20th Century Fox. That merger took a couple of years. That merger took place in 2019. This movie, Sound of Freedom, the distribution rights were held by 20th Century Fox. So when Disney acquired 20th Century Fox, Disney had the distribution rights now. Well, not only did Disney have the distribution rights to Sound of Freedom, Disney had the distribution rights to 246 other movies. Do you think Disney released 245 movies and held on to Sound of Freedom and said, no, 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 we don't want this message out there? No, Disney went through all 246 movies that were in various states of production. Some of them were in pre-production, some of them were halfway through, some of them were completed, like Sound of Freedom. Disney went through each one of those movies and decided, yes, we're going to keep this movie. No, we're not going to keep this movie. We're going to see if we can sell it off to somebody else. And it was a business decision. In fact, what's really interesting is the movie producer, Edward I'm going to totally pronounce his last name or mispronounce his last name, Verasatugi. He told the Washington Examiner, every studio that considered this movie was worried about losing money. They were not worried about the message of the movie. They're in the business of making money, and they weren't sure that this movie could make money. Well, what ended up happening was Angel Studios came along and they said, hey, we think we'd be interested in this. They showed it to some of their investors who said, yes, we are interested in this. So then Angel Studios had to pay Disney to get the distribution rights from Disney, which is why they had to raise the $5 million from their investors,
Right.
because Disney was like, yeah, we'll give it to you, but you got to pay us money. It was never about the topic. And so that's really what's bugged me in a lot of the rhetoric that's been going on behind the scenes. I'm glad the movie has been so successful. It's pretty unusual for an indie movie like this that I think
Right.
was about a $10 million make to be so successful. And it really is raising an issue with regards to child trafficking. I know there's also a lot of controversy with regards to how Tim Ballard does that, and I am not going to comment on that at this point in time. But I am going to comment on the fact that this is a serious issue that we need to pay attention to, and so this is the article this week that has got my blood boiling because of just the misrepresentations and making this out to be maybe a lot more sinister than motives really were.
I think it's easy to fall into that trap of like thinking if something's happening, it's because of one thing, when really there's this whole giant story behind the scenes that you kind of have to navigate. You have
Yeah.
to be able to understand the whole thing. And just the fact that there's the merger between companies, and then like obviously that's going to take time to organize huge companies, not
Yeah.
like Crumble and Dirty Dough, like big gigantic companies, you know what I mean, that like have, I
Exactly.
mean, billions of dollars that are like kind of getting all worked out. That's going to take time. Obviously there's no like, well, obviously everyone wants to protect children from predators. Like that's like an obvious thing that we're all really serious about, especially in the Mormon communities, is like
Yeah.
we really treasure children and we really want to be sure to keep them safe. So that's not like my beef at all, but I have a similar feeling that it's not, no one's I want to say like no one's trying to hurt, you know what I mean, like
Yeah.
this message. It's
Yeah.
like we're just trying to like work it all out. I mean, everyone has to work out all of the business arrangements for anything like this, so it's important to just make sure that the story is straight and not tie the two together into a little bow, because it's not the truth, you know what I mean, and it takes
Exactly.
away from the message of like we need to make sure to do what we're doing to make sure that kids have safe places to be. So
Exactly. Exactly. And I just and it's got all kind of convoluted into this conspiracy theory that
right.
really has no merit to it. So
And really that takes away from the effort it
Yeah.
makes it like it makes all of not all but it makes a lot of the efforts to protect the children or to protect our families
Yeah.
and keep safe spaces. It just like kind of convolutes the whole thing to make it harder to understand what's happening, and it just
Well,
makes it a bigger mess.
I think it impacts the credibility of the movie.
Yeah.
If you're out there kind of not allowing these kind of half truths and misguided ideas to perpetuate themselves on social media because it's driving ticket sales for your movie, to me it impacts your credibility. And that means
Yeah.
when I watch that movie, I'm going to be watching it going, I don't
Right.
know. And so that's the impact that it has on me. Is I'm like, I don't know if I can take what comes out of your mouth. Am I going
Right.
to take it with a grain of salt?
Well, that's the problem when we tie, you know what I mean, things
Yeah.
together. Like it just makes the whole thing a bit messier than it should be.
Yeah,
We can't really protect the children if we're also worrying about conspiracy theories and, Disney hates us and we're not, like it just
exactly.
makes it too big of a muddled mess. So I'm with you. I obviously need children to have safe places and, to
Yeah,
build in safety nets in our society that protect people from vulnerable people from predators. But I
exactly.
hope the movie does tons of good and raises a lot of awareness for the actual issue instead of all of the other fluff that's coming with it.
Exactly. All
So.
right. Well, now that we've discussed really like heavy topics, let's move on. We've got a bunch of
Cute
human interest
topic.
stories that are much more
Yes.
lightweight. Let's move on to some lighter topics. Let's talk about Kenneth Rooks. You
Kenneth
watched this
Rooks.
video, so tell me
I
all
did.
about it.
I watched this video. We're not like track enthusiasts particularly in my house, but we love the Olympics. So, but we Kenneth Rooks, we watched this guy who's like just this like big fan, and he talked all about how there was someone in the race against Kenneth Rooks who's like the number one, he has the highest or the fastest times and he's, unbeatable. And they were
Okay,
talking about
Sarah, I'm going to
yeah.
pause you just for a minute
Yep.
here because let's give a little background for
Oh
our
yeah.
listeners who don't understand who Kenneth Rooks is.
Oh yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
I'm going to let you give the background and then tell us about what happened.
So Kenneth Rooks is a runner, a track and field runner for BYU. Um, and I'm trying to pull up the details because I don't want to speak wrong. Let me just.
He does the steeplechase, is what he does.
That's right. I was wondering. I'm like, I think I remember the specific thing. He does the steeplechase, which is the run with there's like hurdles, and then you run and jump
Mhm.
into water, and you have to do it's this like very intense, long track and field um, race that is hard. Like I think
Yeah,
it's like a big deal
yeah,
to get qualified for the race, and then it's this big event that everyone kind of watches for because it kind of combines a bunch of track um, skills together in one race. Um, so he starts off his. I think the video said that the world record was set in like 70 something, so like a super long time ago, and it has never been like beat or come close to in this specific race. And so Kenneth Rooks, well, all of the athletes line up and they start their race, and he takes a pretty serious spill and he falls, and it was kind of like we watched the video of it, and there were like people like tumbling all over him. It was like very intense because he was in a middle lane with all of the runners on the other side. So they were all kind of like trying to navigate this
yeah.
runner that was down.
Well, and I
And
think he fell in lap 2 of a 7.5 lap race. So pretty early on.
right. So it was like the beginning of the race. And you could hear the announcers being like, well, that's unfortunate. There's no one that's ever come back for anything like that. Like, that's one of those falls. They were like just down on him. Like,
Yeah,
that's just one of those falls that you never, recover from. And, it was like just such a bummer because you could just see it in him that, I mean, that's a huge bummer to prepare and be, on
yeah,
this competitive thing forever. And then they kept showing the race and they kept showing him just like steady passing, you know what I mean? And he ran
yeah.
like a super clean race from rounds 2 through, you said 7, right?
7.5 laps.
Okay, yeah. So for the rest of the laps, he was so clean and he ended up winning the whole race, and he came like 2 seconds from the world record that hadn't
Yeah.
been broken forever. And everyone, all of the announcers were just like shocked because he beat the guy that was supposed to win by a mile, and he had this like kind of catastrophic
Yeah.
fall at the beginning, which is just crazy. Like it's just a crazy
Yeah.
situation. So it was really cool to read, and it's really inspiring to see that, you can come back from things and it's not, you know, always what it seems.
Exactly.
So,
One of the things that I liked about the article is so the reporters interviewed him after the race, and they were stunned to learn that he had actually planned for the moment that he fell. Before the race, he says, before the race, I thought about, if I fall, what am I going to do? How am I going to respond? I decided to get up and continue, he said. And then he says,
mm,
after he fell, his brain immediately told him he was done. And the video shows him hesitate for the slightest moment before he stood up. Then his advanced planning kicked in, and he turned and set out after the pack of runners. And over the course of the next 5 laps, he's just slowly gaining, gaining, gaining. And
right.
I think, what a good story to illustrate a whole number of principles. First of all, I love the idea of he thought about this beforehand and what am I going to do and how am I going to respond? So it wasn't even a question when this trial pops up. He knows how he's going to respond. He knows he's going to get
Right.
up.
And he's probably
Um,
fallen before in
yes,
practice. I
he
mean, so
has.
like it wasn't like, oh no, this is
Yeah,
like I mean, which is kind of cool to use those experiences as like a stepping stone to something better. You know what I mean? And to help you
exactly.
prepare for the inevitable fall.
Exactly. So, if you haven't watched the video and the accompanying commentary, we will link that in the show notes and the article, and you should definitely do that. I'm going to make a prediction here and now. I'm with you, Sarah. We're not big sports fans in my house, but the Olympics rolls around and my butt is in front of the
Uh,
TV for the
um,
whole 14 days the
that's exactly
Olympics is
how we
on.
feel too. We have parties. We're like, very,
Exactly. I have a
oh,
feeling that we are going to see Brother Rooks in
I
about a
hope
year
so. In
at the
Paris.
Olympics in Paris, and he will be running the steeplechase.
That'd be
So
so cool. We
we
can
will
all cheer for him
we
because you
can
heard it here.
all cheer for him. So, okay, well, we're getting down a little bit on time, so I'm just gonna briefly touch on the next one. There is a basketball player. He played for Utah State. His name is Justin Bean. Deseret News did an article on him. He would like to play for the NBA. He's done a lot of the sub league teams and the summer teams for the NBA, but he finally got picked up by a basketball team in Germany. So he and his wife are headed over to Germany. She's pregnant. They, of course, are members of the church. And just the article was talking about how their faith is going to sustain them in going to a foreign country and playing basketball over there. And it was just kind of a nice little uplifting article about Brother Bean.
I love that. My husband lived in Germany with his family when he was a kid, and for a couple years, and they still to this day talk about the time they had and being away
Yeah,
from everybody, and it's just such a cool thing to use your faith, and it's cool that he can use his skills in basketball to be able to provide that kind of an experience for his family. That's really cool.
it's going to be awesome.
So our next story is about the um, comedian Ryan Hamilton. He was hit by a bus and he wanted it to be a tragedy, but really it's a comedy. And it's this cute article that talks about his, recovery and how he kind of came back to the comedy world. And it was a cute article that just talked about kind of the experiences he had as he was recovering and how to make this into a funny thing. And it just kind of shows his like true, like value of humor in his like
Yeah,
throughout this super crazy story of being hit by a bus and all of the trials that come along with that. He just kept finding this humor and this laughter and this um throughout this
yeah,
whole story. And I just thought it was a really sweet kind of thing for all of us. We can all do probably better in our
exactly.
trials to be find the light in each one of those. So
Exactly. So, yes, my sister and I covered this when he did get hit by a bus.
okay.
He is a member of the church, and what's really interesting about this article is it goes into his background about how he came up in comedy, which I did not know because
Oh
when we
yeah.
talked about him getting hit by a bus, Ariane and I both knew who he was because he's got a Netflix special called Happy Face. So if you have not watched his Netflix special called Happy Face, you should go watch it. Very clean comedy, and you should go watch it. And so we had actually seen the Netflix special, so we knew who he was when the story came out about him getting hit by a bus. And so the article goes into his history, and then it goes, just like you said, into how he's recovered from getting hit by a bus and turned this tragedy into part of his comedy routine. And he's like, I can't get up on stage without talking about getting hit by a bus. Everybody knows.
Oh, that's so funny.
All right. So, last story, quick mention. There is a gentleman by the name of Don Aslett, and he is an Idaho boy. You know how I love my Idaho peeps. And he has been a cleaning guru. He is 88 years old. If you go to Pocatello, Idaho, there is a museum in Pocatello, Idaho called the Museum of Clean that has a vacuum collection, because he's collected vacuums over the years, and all sorts of cleaning instruments and tools. And he made his life mission about cleaning, and he wrote books, and he would go along and do seminars. And I recall when I was a kid, I must have been maybe 10, 11 years old, somewhere in there. He came to Boise, and I remember going to hear him speak with my mother. And I can't remember what he asked, but he asked somebody from the audience to come up, and well, guess who came up?
Oh, that's so cute.
I can't remember what he asked me, but I ended up with a squeegee. I got a squeegee for my troubles. Anyway, so if you're traveling through Pocatello and you want something fun to do, go visit Don Aslett's Museum of Clean. And like I said, there was a new article just kind of on him and his history in East Idaho News this week. That's why we covered him. So
That's so cute.
all right. Shall we move on to my favorite segment, which is Mormons behaving badly?
I just would like to say that as a fan of the podcast, I live for these updates. So
Oh, gosh.
thank you for continuing
You're
to
welcome.
tell these stories. I need to hear it.
All right. So Mormons behaving badly. I don't have any new Mormons behaving badly this week, but I do have updates. So as a fan of the podcast, what did you think of my Mormons behaving badly last week with the parents who were suing the school district because their son had sex at school in the school parking lot?
I had like so many discussions about this story with my friends and family because I just was like, am I off base? This seems so ludicrous to me. But like,
Exactly.
maybe I'm the one that's not thinking through it. I just can't. I love that they threw it out. I just felt so happy.
Exactly.
No, that's not
Exactly.
a thing we're going to do.
Well, and I'm still mad that the parents filed it under John and Jane Doe. I'm like,
I know. I
Own it.
know. I
If you
always
think
tell my
this
kids
is so
that.
bad, own it. And
Yep.
clearly you're not
Put
owning
your
it, so
name.
clearly you know you're being stupid.
Yes, I agree.
All right, so updates. I have a Lori Vallow update and I have a Bundy update. So we will start with Lori Vallow. As you know, she is the mom that was convicted of murdering her children, and she is actually set for sentencing this Monday. So 2 days from now, she's going to be sentenced. Anybody who wants to watch it, it will be live streamed on East Idaho News. You can watch it. I'm really curious what's going to happen in her set. Well, I know what her sentence is going to be, at least what I think it's going to be. I'm pretty sure she's going to get life in prison. What I think is going to be really interesting is the judge's commentary. So this judge had to sit through this 8-week trial, look at horrific evidence, hear horrific stories. He has not been allowed, he couldn't speak under the judicial rules prior to sentencing and share his opinion. But at sentencing, he gets to share his opinion. So I'm sure I will have an update as to his opinion. But the reason that this story made the news this week is at sentencing, judges are allowed to consider what's called victim impact statements. And victim impact statements can be submitted in writing, and they can also be presented verbally. So under the Idaho law, you have to be a direct family member to be able to give a victim impact statement. So we know that Lori's remaining child, Cody, is going to give a victim impact statement. We know that Samantha William, who is Tammy Daybell's sister, is going to give an impact statement. Or no, she's not going to give an impact statement in court. I'm trying to remember who the other person was that was going to give an impact, a verbal statement in court. What happened is Vicky Hoban, who is Tammy's aunt, requested from the judge to be able to give a verbal impact statement. The judge initially denied her request, saying, "You're an aunt, you're not immediate family. Under Idaho law, you don't constitute immediate family and you can't give an impact statement." Hoban responded and she said, "Well, I want to speak in place of my sister Phyllis Douglas, who is Tammy's mother, and she died in June. So I did not
Oh,
realize that Tammy's mother had actually died in
oh,
June."
that is so
And
sad.
so when the judge realized that Tammy's mother, who is an immediate family member, had died, he said, "Yes, you may make a victim impact statement." At
Is
which
she going to be
time,
speaking for the mother? Like, it did the mom write
yes.
an impact statement or something? And she's going to be
Well,
reading her mom's words or like saying what she felt?
I think she's probably going to be saying what she felt.
Okay.
I am sure that that Vicky Hoban probably had a conversation with her sister and will probably be explaining her sister's feelings and how her sister felt about this and how it impacted her
Right.
sister.
Okay.
So Tammy's attorneys objected to this because Tammy's attorney said she doesn't meet the definition of a victim impact statement in Idaho. And Tammy's father has submitted a written statement, and Tammy's sister has submitted a written statement. So this is just repetitive and we don't need
Hmm.
it. So the judge held a hearing on that motion and the judge denied their motion. And so we will get to hear from Vicky Hoban on Monday with a victim impact statement. So, in addition to, like I said, I know that Lori's son is testifying, the remaining son that is still alive. And I think there's one other person, but I can't recall right off the top of my head who that is. So,
That's wild. I'm so glad that they have the opportunity though to like
yeah,
speak from their heart and not be like asked questions. I know that, you know what I mean? The
yeah,
confines of a trial are just so specific
exactly.
for a reason. I mean, that's fine, but I'm glad they have an opportunity to be able to really speak about, you know, the actual impact of their life.
Exactly.
Oh,
And
that's
I
cool.
think it'll be interesting to get some insight from the family to see, you know, what their thoughts are, how this has impacted them, what they would
Yeah.
like to see the judge do. So,
Yeah.
okay, Ammon Bundy, my Lifetime Achievement Award winner for Mormons behaving badly. He's been in a little civil lawsuit with St. Luke's because St. Luke's sued him for defamation because he made all sorts of false statements against St. Luke's. He refused to participate in this lawsuit, but under Idaho law, they had to go ahead and proceed. The attorney for St. Luke's was able to get a default judgment against him, but they had to have a jury trial to determine the amount of damages. So that jury came back with a $26.5 million verdict for compensatory damages and $26 million in punitive
Oh
damages.
my gosh.
Now,
So much
this
money.
was spread out among several entities because not only did they sue Bundy, they sued the gentleman that was with Bundy, Diego Rodriguez. This was all over Child Protection Services taking Diego Rodriguez's grandchild into protective services because they felt that he was malnourished. So Ammon Bundy is personally responsible for $6.2 million in compensatory and $6.15 million in punitive. His People's Rights Network is responsible for $5.2 million in compensatory and $5.2 million in punitive. And the probably defunct Ammon Bundy for governor is responsible for $1.5 million in compensatory and $1.6 million in punitive. Um,
That's crazy.
it is going to be really interesting, and I will continue to follow this to see if they are going to be able to collect from him.
Yeah.
Knowing that he was probably going to get judgments against him, he has been transferring and hiding assets. So we will see what the St. Luke's attorneys do to
Oh,
undo what he has done.
that's crazy.
This is not over yet, folks.
Continue.
It
Put a little
is
pin in that for later.
exactly. All right. Well,
Oh.
we are coming to the end. So let's talk about favorite things. As you know, Ariane and I always like to share our favorite thing. This is not anything that we get paid for, just things that we like, whether it's an item, a podcast, a TV show. So, Sarah, I'm going to let you go first. Tell me what your favorite thing is this week.
My favorite thing this week is a book. It's
Oh,
called Lessons in Chemistry. And I mean, it's for sale at Costco. It's everywhere. It's like a really big. Did you guys already cover Lessons in Chemistry?
I've never even heard of
Oh,
lessons in
okay. I
chemistry.
was like, oh
So,
no, I'm repeating. It is darling book. I mean, it's not like groundbreaking or life changing or anything, but like it was a super fun summer read. My neighborhood did a neighborhood book club and we read Lessons in Chemistry. And it's about a woman in the 50s, 60s who is a chemist, and it's all about her like plight for respect in the workplace as a woman and as a professional woman. And then, it just is this really cool, cute story. It's really well written. But my favorite piece of it is the woman who wrote Lessons in Chemistry. It's her debut novel, and she's like 60 years old. And so you just know
Oh,
that she's like been holding this story, do you know what I mean? Or this
I do.
idea
Yeah.
forever. And I just like feel like it's ragingly successful. It's all over the place. And it was written so well. And I just like love the characters. All of them have just such unique voices. And I just really loved it. So everyone should read it in the world.
Okay. Well, that is awesome.
Yeah.
So mine this week is going to be the Barbie movie.
The Barbie movie.
I loved the Barbie movie. I talked a little bit last week on the podcast. One of the things that my sisters and I did while we were in California was we went to the Barbie movie, and we were down in Santa Monica because there was a Barbie World experience that we went to too. It was so fun because it was just a sea of pink in Santa Monica. Everybody was dressing up, and not everybody in the movie, but a lot of people at the movie were dressed in pink, and girlfriends were out together. And I just thought the movie was so cute. I thought it was really well done. And I loved everything about it. I'm going to take my teenage daughter to see it this week. And so I highly recommend it. Again, there's been controversy about the Barbie movie as well, and the messaging of the Barbie movie. I don't think we can do anything without controversy, but
I know.
I don't
How
buy
it
into
feels.
the controversy, and I thought the movie was great. So there
I
you
felt
go.
the same way. I also saw it this week and thought, oh, this is a cute movie.
Exactly.
I
Exactly.
took my kids, they loved it. So I feel
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
that's
It's
it.
a movie. It's fun.
Yeah, that's why I said, let's just let it be a movie. Let's just let
Exactly.
it be, an hour and a half of time or 2 hours or whatever. That's all it needs to be.
Exactly.
So,
All
anyway,
right. Well, that wraps it up for this edition of This Week in Mormons. Sarah, thank you so much for joining us. I had a blast with you.
I
I
did
hope
too.
that you will come back again, that I haven't frightened you off. Will you come back again sometime?
I will. I'm happy to. This has been such a fun thing.
Oh, good.
So,
So, Twim Nation, thank you very much for your support. As always, you can find us on all the different social media platforms. We are on Facebook, we are on Instagram, we are on Twitter. And I know last week when I was talking about Twitter, I was like, well, I think we still tweet. I did get confirmation this week of that Kurt is actually in charge of the Twitter account. So, Kurt
very fun.
does all the tweeting when you see the tweeting. So, yes, we are still active on Twitter. And for anybody who wants to be a true supporter, you can join Patreon, and you can go on Patreon, donate any amount that you want. There is extra content that is available to our Patreon subscribers. In fact, when we are finished here, Sarah and I are going to record a little extra content for the Patreon subscribers. So we'd encourage all of you to subscribe to Patreon, help us keep the lights on, and thank you very much.
Thanks.